Welcome to Classics with Kelsey and Sarah, and today we're discussing Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. So I was really excited when we chose to read this because it was just how impactful it was to our country.
Yes, like the best-selling novel in the 19th century.
Yeah, and the impact it had on changing people's hearts towards slavery.
Exactly. I think Abraham Lincoln said something about like, "Oh, so you're the lady who started this war."
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I was reading that recently. Actually, I was looking up some stuff about Harriet Beecher Stowe for a friend. So,
okay.
Yeah, that was a fun quote, and I can tell. But after reading this book, you could really tell why it was so impactful.
Yes, she really humanized the all of the elements instead of people just thinking about slavery in the abstract. She really depicted it for what it was,
and I think one of the important things she did is show that the many different types of slaves and slave owners there were, instead of, I think, some people who had tried to make people listen before had kind of just like had this tyrannical slave owner that was always horrible, and that wasn't everyone, and so it kind of just fell on deaf ears. And this showed that even good slaves and bad slaves and slave owners that cared and slave owners that didn't, and in between, and it really helped people to see the scope of what it was.
Yes. It's really an epic book because it just had so many different characters and so many different situations, and then the way that they're all connected to is always really neat to see, and it just was really groundbreaking, I think, in the way that the black slaves were just really not depicted in fiction, at least not with any depth, but she really showed them that they were people too, and had and that something needed to change. Something huge.
And so the story is about Uncle Tom, who's the main character, and his faith in God is just so strong throughout the whole story, which was I was not expecting quite how strong it was, but the whole story revolves around his faith through trying circumstances, because his first owner is a very good man, but he's in debt, and so he decides to sell Tom and a child, slave Harry, or Henry.
I think it's
Harry. Yes. To this man to settle his debts, and the mother of the little boy ends up running away with him, and Uncle Tom is sold.
Yes, he's sold further south, which means that things generally get worse further south, and he eventually ends up with this family that's actually a pretty decent family, especially the little daughter. Her name's Eva, and she is another Christian character who just has an amazing faith, and so she and Tom get along really well. Yeah, she and Tom had a very sweet relationship. I enjoyed that a lot.
And I guess the rest of the book's hard to talk about without giving much away, because it's so rich and stuff. You don't want to give anything away from people who want to read it.
Yes.
But there are a lot of plot twists. A lot of characters end up being connected. That's really neat.
Yeah, that's a really neat thing to see, the connections, and it keeps the book surprising too.
Yeah. And I think this one kind of ended a little bit on a sadder note than a lot of the books, at least I tend to read. But it was just so good. It wasn't really super depressing. I didn't feel.
No. I think it was very impactful that way, and it's the kind of book that makes you want to change things.
Yes.
And it's just a testimony to the power of fiction that this book just changed so many people's mindsets about this issue, and just kind of an inspiration for people who, like us, who are writers, and other people who just like to read, that books really do influence your mind. So, choose good books to read.
Yes. And I think the neat thing about Uncle Tom's Cabin is that it's still so readable today. I mean, some of the books that were kind of driven by issues of the day aren't as impactful now when you read them. I mean, some of them are timeless, but some of them lose stuff over time. And this one really, it's still impactful today. There's still so many good lessons, even though slavery is not in our country anymore. It's still a very readable book and still has some very applicable lessons.
Yes, that's for sure. It's I'd say it's very important for any historical study of the United States.
Definitely. Yeah. I feel like I understood better some of the, what stirred people up. Like Abraham Lincoln. So you're the woman who started the war.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, definitely a more difficult book to get through, and so when we did finish with it, we felt very satisfied that we read it. Yes. But we were also ready for a little bit of a lighter book.
Definitely, definitely. And
so the next book that we read is Celia's House by D.E. Stevenson, and so we'll look forward to telling you more about that.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye.